Hey guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. My name is Amal Aziz Khan and I welcome you all to yet another session that is based on the concept of static routing protocol. In other words, we should say that how to configure routers statically. In this lecture, we are going to configure 5 routers and establish a network between 5 routers and see that how they are going to be formed statically. So let us proceed to our practical implementation. First of all, we will require 5 routers. You can choose any router of your desire. I will arrange the routers. Now we will require switches for establishing a connection between the routers individually. Finally, the PCs that are going to be established using the particular routers individually. You can choose laptop or any other device accordingly, but the main concept is configuring them statically that you are going to learn. It's a lengthy video. I will try to tell you the concept, but you just need to focus on the concept. Other configuration have been explained to you in my previous lectures based on the concept of network and simulation. You just need to focus on the configuration in terms of routing, and I will focus on that. First of all, I need to establish a connection between the routers and the switches. Now for establishing a connection between the router physically, I need to configure the ports of the router. For that, I will go to the router section. Here I will go to the physical section, turn off the router, assign a module to the router, and then turn it on. Same procedure with the other routers as well. Turn off modules, turn it off modules, and assigning ports. Now I will establish physical connection between the routers in terms of the serial ports that I have assigned. Make sure that the router is turned on once the port have been assigned, otherwise the cables are not going to be connected. So now all the routers, switches and PCs have been connected physically but not logically. For logical connection, we will do the configuration from the router end. But before doing the configuration, let us mention the IPs before, as it is a good practice to remember the IPs. Let's say I have assigned an IP from the class A. You can assign IP from any class as per your requirement. And it's a good practice to mention the IPs that are going to be configured. But once the configuration is done, you tend to lose out the IPs. So it's a good practice to remember the IPs and placing them at the start. Now the IPs of individual routers. Last one. The IPs that are mentioned between the switches and routers are going to be used as a gateway, and the IPs that are established between the routers are used as a source and destination. Now we'll do the configuration. We'll go to the router section, go to the CLI. As I mentioned earlier, the command section have been implemented in my previous lecture. I will just focus on the main thing, that is configuration. Interface 0/0/ IP assigned as a gateway, that is basically 5.0.0.1 having a subnet as of class A, 1 network and 3 hosts. No shutdown. Similarly to the serial as well, interface serial number is 0/1/0. We'll mention the serial address, that is 10.0.0.1 having a subnet as no shutdown and exit. Similarly to the second router as well, the same proceeding. No configure terminal interface gigabit Ethernet, that's going to be used as a gateway IP, that is 6.0.1 down exit. Similarly, IP assigned to the serial port, that is 0/1/1 having IP address as 10.0.0.2 is a subnet mask. No shutdown and exit. Similarly, I will assign IP to the next serial, that is basically 0/1/0 0/1/0 having IP address as 11.0 0.0.1 55.0.0. No shutdown and exit. Now I will go through this router CLI, same proceeding. It's a hectic task, but the concept is known, you can do it. Interface gigabit Ethernet, the port of the gigabit Ethernet. IP address, that is basically 7.0.0.1 having a subnet as 255.0.0. Down and exit. Similarly, IP to the serial, that is interface serial 0/1/1 IP address 1.0.0.2 having a subnet as class A. No shutdown and exit. Similarly, I will assign the IP to this serial as well, that is 0/1/0 again. Is serial 0/1/0. IP address is, let me check the IP address, that is basically 12.0.0.1 12.0.0.1 255.0. No shutdown, exit. Similarly, I will go to this router 3. No, enable configure terminal interface gigabit Ethernet as a gateway router. IP assigned. Check out the IP for router 3, that is basically 8.0.0.1. Exit. Similarly, IP assigned to the serial port. Interface serial number is 0/1/1 0/1/1 and the IP address is 12.0.0.2 255.0.0.0. No shutdown and exit. Similarly, we will now assign this IP address to this serial that is going to be established between router 4, that is 0/2/0. So interface serial 0/2/0 IP address 13.0.0.1 255.0.0.0. No shutdown. Exit and go to the last router and configure accordingly. The terminal interface gigabit Ethernet as a gateway router 0/0/0 IP addresses 9.0.0.1 255.0.0.0. No shutdown and exit. Finally, we will go through the I think I have not mentioned the serial port internet. I forgot that. As I told you, it's a hectic task, but if you know the concept, you can easily establish. Just 13.0.0.2 255.0.0.0. No shutdown. Now the configuration have been done in terms of routers and switches, but the IPs have not been assigned to PCs. Now for assigning IPs to PCs, I will use the method of dynamically. How it is going to be implemented? We'll type a command that is based as ipdhcp pool, where I will mention the network name. Let's suppose the network name is based on my name, that is ML, and the default router is 5.0.0.1 that is established between the PC switch and router. Its network address will be 5.0.0.0 having a subnet as 255.0.0.0. And now with the help of this command, I can easily assign IP to this PC with the help of DHCP server. You can see that the IP has been assigned easily, having a gateway as 5.0.0.1 and the IP address as 5.0.0.2. Similarly, we will do the same proceeding with the other routers as well. IPDHCP pool, let's say it's ML1, default router 6.0.0.1 having a network 6.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0. Exit and assign IP to the PC accordingly. Similarly, the same proceeding with the third router as well. IP DHCP ML1, ML2, let's suppose the router is 7.0.0.1 having network as 7.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0. And now we will provide the IP to the PC. Stop IP address DHCP. Let's see whether it's proceeding or not successfully. Now we'll proceed to this router. IP DHCP pool ML2, let's suppose ML3, let's suppose default router 8.0.0.1 having a network as 8.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0. Exit. Now we'll assign the PC the IP dynamically with the help of DHCP. Let's see whether assigned. Yes, the IP has been assigned successfully. Finally, we'll proceed to the last router and assign IP DHCP pool, that is pool ML4. The IPS default router will be 9.0.0.1 and the network will be 9.0.0.0 having subnet as 55.0.0. Exit. And finally we'll assign IP to the PC. We'll go to a desktop section, we'll go to a DHCP and IP is assigned successfully. Now the IPs have been also assigned to the PCs, the routers and the switches have been configured. The last thing that is going to be needed is the configuration between the router and switches, which has not been done so far. Let us see. No, it's not been done. Now in order to make it successful, we'll require a command that is basically IP. Let's suppose I want to configure first these two routers. I will type the command IP root the default gateway, that is basically 6.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0, and where I need to configure I need to go to this destination address. I will mention its name. I will exit it, and the same proceeding will be done with this router. I will type the command IP root having a default gateway 5.0.0 to 255.0.0.0 and the destination is 10.0.0.1. Exit. Let us check whether it is proceeding now or not. At start it will give us a failed impression. Now I will check it again. It's successful. So you can see that the message has been sent successfully. Why it is done? We have sent a message from this default gateway to this one using this destination address. Similarly, we have sent message from PC1 to PC0 having this default gateway and this destination address. Now I will configure this two router, and this two router, so the individual routers can be easily sending messages. Then I will configure the first with the third, first with the fourth, and first with the fifth. Let us see the proceeding. I will go to the second router now. Do the proceeding again. Configure terminal IP root gateway 7.0.0.0 and IP is 255.0.0 and the destination address is this one. Similarly, I will do the same proceeding from router 2 to router 1. IP root 6.0.0.0 having a subnet as. This is the default gateway and the destination to reach is 11.0.0.1. Let us check whether it's proceeding or not. It started to show us the failed sign. It's successful. Now we will configure router 2 and router 3. Configure terminal IP root router 2 and 3. The root is 8.0.0.0 to 55.0.0 as a default gateway and the destination IP is 12.0.0.2. Similarly, I will go through the router 3 and the same proceeding as IP root. The default gateway is 7.0.0.0 having a subnet as 255.0.0.0 and the destination as 12.0.0.1. Now check whether they are sending message successfully or not. It started will show us the failed sign. Let us check again. It's successful. Now we will assign between router 3 and router 4 the communication. So we'll go to the configuration of router 3, enable, configure terminal, IP root, a destination address, the default gateway, it is going to be 9.0.0 having subnet as 255.0.0 and the destination IP. Similarly, from this to router 4 to router 3, IP root, default gateway is 8.0.0.0 having a subnet as 255.0.0 and the destination IP as 13.0.0.1. Now let us check whether it's working or not. It started to show the failed sign once again. Yes, it's doing successfully. Now all the PCs are sending message individually, but what if I want to send a message from router 1 to router 3 and similarly from router 2 to router 3 and similarly from router 2 to router 4? It is not doing that. So for that we will need to do the configuration in terms of all the possible situations. First of all, I want to do the configuration between router 0 and router 2, then router 1 and router 3, similarly then between router 2 and router 4. So first of all, I will go to the router 1. I will proceed the same proceeding, configuration terminal, IP root. Here my root is now changed. It is 7.0.0.0 to 255.0.0 and a destination to reach is 11.0.0.2. Similarly, on this destination, the next IP on this route will be 10.0.0.2. So I will mention this destination address name as well. That is 7.0.0.0, 255.0.0.0 and 10.0.0.2. The thing to remember is that at start when I was individually configuring the router, I was using only the one default gateway. Here I will use two gateway, but on this gateway I will use the two destination address, and this gateway is going to be used as an intermediate between this router and this router. That is the basic difference between configuring two routers and three routers. Similarly, I will use this gateway and IP assigned to this gateway, that is 11.0.0.1. Exact the same procedure between router 2. Enable configure terminal IP route. This is a default gateway, that is 5.0.0.0 to 55.0.0 and the destination is 10.0.0.1. Similarly, on this default gateway, the next destination address is 11.0.0.1 and the default gateway, both the router 0 and router 2 is going to be 6.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0 having IPS 10.0.0.2. Exit. Now I will check out whether it is performing the functionality or not. Yes, it is. So now you can see that a message is being easily shared from first router to third router and easily from first to second. Now what if I want to configure from second to third, from router 1 to router 3 and router 2 to router 4? I will do the same procedure. So let us proceed. As I mentioned earlier, the concept need to be understood. Everything is going to be implemented. IP route from router 1 to router 3, the same proceeding. To router 3, the default IP is 8.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0, and to reach this destination, my destination IP is this one. Similarly, on this route, the next destination address is 11.0.0.2 and the default route is 7.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0, 11.0.0.1. No, it's 12.0.0. I forgot. Similarly, with this router, we'll do the same proceeding. Enable configure terminal IP route. From here to here, the destination default route is 55.0.0 and the destination IP is 11.0.0.1. On this route, next destination IP address is 12.0.0.1 and the default route that is going to establish between both the routers is 7.0.0.0. Destination IP is 11.0.0.2. Check whether it is implementing or not. Successful. Now from router 2 to router 4, the same proceeding. Enable configure terminal IP route 9.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0. The IP to reach is 13.0.0.2. Similarly, on the same route, other IP to reach is 12.0.0.2 and the default will be 0.0.0. having subnet as 255.0.0. The destination I will be different, the subnet will be the same. Similarly to the router 4, the same proceeding. Enable configure terminal IP root, and where to reach, I have to reach router 2 7.0.0.0 255.0.0.0 0.0.1. Similarly IP root, the same root 7.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0, and the next IP that I'm going to reach is 13.0.0.1. The default IP will be 8.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0 and 12.0.0.2. Exit, and now I will check that whether router 2 and 4 have been sending the message successfully or not. They are. So now the first 3 routers have been sending message successfully. Between these 2 routers the message has been sent successfully, and between these 2 routers the message has been sent successfully. Now the last thing that is going to be needed is between this one and between this one and between this one. We are going to configure all the routers, so we have to configure all the possible situations. First of all, I will go for the configuration of first and the fourth one. So let us do the proceeding. Enable configure terminal IP root. From first to 4, the default root is going to be 8.0.0.0 0.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0, and destination IP will be 12.0.0.2. Similarly, on the same route as well, last one is 10.0.0.2. Here the default router has been also increased. First default router is this one, and second default router is this one. So I will mention first of all the first default router. Minimize the size. IP route 6.0.0.0 to 5.0.0.0, having IP as 11.0.0.1, and the next one as 7.0.0.0 to 5.0.0.0, having IP as 12.0.0.1. Same proceeding with router 3. Terminal IP root 5.0.0.0 to 5.0.0.0, the first destination to reach 10.0.0.1. Similarly, on the way to IP root 5.0.0.0 to 5.0.0.0, the next one is going to be 11.0.0.1. Similarly, IP root 5.0.0.0 to 5.0.0.0, and the next one is going to be 12.0.0.1. Now I will provide the default IPs. The first one is IP root 7.0.0.0 to 5.0.0.0, and the default IP. The second one is IP root 6.0.0.0 to 5.0.0.0, and default IP is. Now I will check whether this first one and the fourth router has been sending the message out successfully or not. Let us check. Yes, they have been sending message successfully. Now I will need to configure the router 1 with router 4 so that router 0 and router 4 are going to configure message successfully. I will do the same proceeding as I did for router 0 and router 3. Enable configure terminal. IP root destination is 9.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0. The IP to reach on that route. Next IP is going to be 12.0.0.2 and the last one is going to be 1.0.0.2. Now the default is that are going to be occurring. Router 1, the first one is 7.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0 having IPS 12.0.0.1. Similarly, IP root 8.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0. Now we'll go to the router 4 and do the same proceeding. Enable configure terminal. IP root 6.0.0.0 default gateway. Destination to reach is 11.0.0.1 on the same route. .0.0.1 and 13.0.0.1. Now we'll go to the default router that is going to be assigned. The first one will IP root 8.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0 and the IP assigned is 12.0.0.2. Similarly, the next one is 9.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0 and the IP assigned will be 13.0.0.2. No, it's not been mentioning. I guess I have mentioned the IP wrong. It's going to be 11.0.0.2 on 7.0.0. Root 7.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0 and where is the IP that I have missed? I missed this IP in this gateway. That is basically 11.0.0.2. Need to be afraid of the mistake will occur, but the main thing is that you have to have the concept, and if you don't have the concept you cannot tackle the mistake. So now let us check whether it is proceeding or not. Successful. From here to here, successful. So now from here to here the message has been sent. Similarly, from here to here the message has been sent. From here to the fourth one is the message being sent. Now just we need to do is configuration between the first one and the last router. The last activity terminal, the same proceeding, IP root 9.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0, destination to reach is 13.0.0.2. On the same route will reach the second destination IP. As mentioning the IP keeps us easier to remember the routing configuration. That is why I have remembered the routing configuration by mentioning out the IPs, and it is a good practice to mention the IPs as it is helpful in configuration. To 55.0.0.0. Similarly, 11.0.0.2, the same proceeding IP. Now I have reached till this point. Now I will use the default gateway, that is basically First one is 6.0.0.0, 255.0.0.0, and the IP to reach is 11.0.0.1. Similarly, on the same route, we will have another IP assigned as 255.0.0.0, and the IP to reach is. And lastly, we'll use the gateway as 8.0.0.0, having a subnet as 255.0.0, and finally we'll have the default IP assigned. And now we'll do the final proceeding. Enable configure terminal IP root 5.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0. I have not mentioned the destination IP. It's quite a hectic task and it consumes a lot of time, but as I've previously mentioned as well, the concept needs to be understood. Mistakes are going to be debugged. What mistake I have done from router 4 to router 1, I need to reach. This is the IP root, same proceeding 5.0.0.0 to 55.0.0.0, and then on the way to this router, this is going to be a default IP. And root. Now the default gateways, the first one is IP 0.0.0 and 0.0.2, 12.0.0.2, sorry. Eleven dot zero dot zero dot two, and last one is 0.0.2. Exit, and finally the hectic task for configuring the 5 routers has been done. Let us check whether it's proceeding or not. No, it's not proceeding. What mistake have been done? Let us check. So again, it's failed. So what is the mistake that I have done? Let us go through that. It's not performing. We'll go through it again. We need to check from here to here whether it is performing or not. It is. So from first to fifth there is a mistake. Once again we will do the same proceeding. Enable configure terminal IP root where we want to reach 9.0.0.0, and the destination is 13.0.0.2. Similarly on the same route we will have 0.2 on the same route, down 0.0.2, and now we will go to the whole section. Okay, I have left one gateway as a destination in my previous working. That's the mistake I have done. I just got my point and got my mistake that I have not mentioned this IP address as to start. What's the IP on this address? That is basically 11.0.0.1. Yes. Similarly on this router 0.0.0.1, and on this I have Let me check whether it's proceeding or not. I think from this end I have done the configuration correctly. 10, 1, 11, 12, 13, all have been mentioned. From here, now let me check whether it's proceeding or not. It's successful now. One mistake that I have done in C, the working was not going to happen. So now you can see that all the routers have been configured successfully. You can send message from router 1 to router 5, similarly from 1 to 3, and from 2 to 4, similarly from 4 to 5th, from third to second, and so on. You can do the configuration. The thing is that you need to know about the default gateway and the destination IP address. All the game is based on the default gateway and the destination IP address, and with the help of this configuration you can implement 5 routers, 6 routers, 7 routers. Yes, it's a hectic task, but it's a useful task, and it can be asked in question and papers regarding the configuration of static routing protocol. So I hope that you have learned something new after watching this lecture, and that's all from my side. I thank you all for watching this video, and if you are still having some confusion, you can ask in the comment section down below. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.